Hello, my name is Christopher Shepard, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the purpose and meaning of the facsimiles, which are found in the Book of Abraham. I won't really be able to talk about a whole lot. However, there are a couple concepts that I would like to cover. I think that the facsimiles are partially supportive and they're also partially esoteric. Partially supportive because they expand on the plan of salvation, partially esoteric because some of it we don't really know a whole lot about. This comes from Unit 6 and the concept of the Book of Abraham. This is relevant to the modern church because the facsimiles have several themes that are also very prevalent in the temple endowment. So understanding these facsimiles a little bit better helps us to also understand the temple endowment. Scriptures from the Doctrine and Covenants that I thought of: D&C 636, look unto me in every thought, doubt not, fear not, as well as D&C 1112, trust in the Spirit that leads us to do good. I thought of these because a lot of the time when people talk about the facsimiles, there's a lot of confusion. However, I think that when we look to Christ and trust in the Spirit that leads us to do good, we are able to understand them a little bit better. And even if we don't, we'll still be able to further grow our faith in the Lord. So the prophetic talks that I looked at were Spiritual Communication by Spencer W. Kimball in April of 1962, and then The Priesthood, Ancient and Modern by Wilford Woodruff in October of 1865. I'm not really going to quote from these, but they both mentioned the facsimiles and helped me understand them a little bit better. Scholarly articles, I didn't just find two, I found four that I kind of quote from in these, and I guess I'll kind of bring them up when I quote them. But yeah, really good articles, very interesting. My first concept is that we can't be 100% sure of what the meaning of the facsimiles was meant to be. So here's a quote from the article Interpreting the Abraham Facsimiles. It says, "What if Abraham's descendants took Egyptian elements of the culture and applied their own meaning to them? We know this happened. Maybe we shouldn't be looking at what Egyptians thought facsimiles meant at all, but rather at how ancient Jews would have interpreted them." So there were a lot of different elements of Egyptian culture that Jews used in their own culture, kind of took them in and applied them to their culture. And so like this could be, when people look at these facsimiles, they say, oh yeah, these are very Egyptian culture heavy, but the Jews probably just took those, they might have taken those elements and applied them to their own religion. Next slide. Here's another quote from an introduction to the Book of Abraham. It says, since the papyri came from the Ptolemaic period, about 1500 years after Abraham, the style of the pictures will not have been the same style as was current in Abraham's day. Abraham may not have included an illustration in his original account. Abraham could have drawn the facsimiles a certain way, and then the Egyptians may have taken them and transcribed them into a different style and format more familiar to them. So, I mean, we have to be aware that these facsimiles were drawn 1500 years after Abraham. So, I mean, the Egyptian, this Egyptian type culture, this Egyptian type style of drawing, very much might have been different from how Abraham had drawn them, or had he even drawn them. So that's something to be aware of as well. And the fact that, I mean, pertaining to how we might not really know what they're supposed to mean. Joseph Smith papers. Here's a quote by May. Well, I couldn't really find one from Joseph Smith himself, but here's one of somebody who I found this on the Joseph Smith papers website. Says, by May of that year, 1842, 3 issues had published 2 installments of the text of the Book of Abraham, as well as 3 facsimiles of vignettes or illustrations found on the papyri. Despite a promise of additional excerpts from the Book of Abraham, no other installments were produced. So I think this is very interesting. And there was also another quote, but I didn't have time to put it in because I'm limited to 7 minutes. But there were a lot of other things written on the papyri that were not included in the Pearl of Great Price, or Joseph Smith just didn't get to translate them into the Book of Abraham. And so there could have been a lot more information given pertaining to what the facsimiles really meant, but we just don't have that. And so that's another thing. Concept 2, hypocephaly. This is a quote from the Pearl of Great Price Central, says, according to the spell 162 of the Book of the Dead, hypocephaly served a number of important purposes: to protect the deceased in the afterlife, to provide light and heat for the deceased, to make the deceased appear again like one who is on earth, and ultimately transform the deceased into a god. So these hypocephali were placed underneath their head. Facsimile 2 is a hypocephaly, and a hypocephalus is essentially they would place it under the deceased person, their head, and this would be a guide to them about how they should go about becoming a god. And we know that Facsimile 2 is a hypocephaly, and it actually really does show us what we can do to become more like God, certain things we can do. So it's very interesting in that regard. My key takeaway is that the facsimiles are meant to bring us closer to God. And although it may not be 100% clear to scholars what the facsimiles are supposed to mean, we can trust the canonized explanations that the Prophet Joseph Smith gave to us. And I don't know, I just think the facsimiles are very important. They're very relevant, but sometimes they're hard to understand, and we just need to bring it back to the Spirit, and trusting the Spirit and the feelings that we have, and trusting God and knowing that He will do what's best for us.